Unmasking the psychopath, beyond the Hollywood stereotype. The word psychopath often conjures up images of chilling villains from movies, cold-blooded killers with no remorse. While this portrayal might make for a thrilling plot, it's a far cry from the reality of psychopathy. Psychopathy is a complex personality disorder characterized by a specific set of traits, not all of which are inherently dangerous. At its core, psychopathy involves a lack of empathy, remorse, and guilt, coupled with superficial charm, manipulativeness, and a disregard for rules. Imagine someone who can commit a morally reprehensible act and not feel a shred of guilt. However, it's crucial to understand that not all psychopaths are destined to become criminals. Some psychopathic traits like fearlessness and charisma can actually be advantageous in certain contexts. By exploring these nuances, we can move beyond the simplistic stereotypes and gain a deeper understanding of this complex condition. The psychopathic spectrum, not one size fits all. Imagine psychopathy not as a single point on a map, but as a vast landscape with varying terrains. Just as a desert differs from a rainforest, the expression of psychopathy can differ drastically from one individual to another. On one end of the spectrum, we might find individuals with mild psychopathic traits. Perhaps they're a bit more charming than average, a bit less risk-averse, and maybe a bit too comfortable bending the rules. As we move further down the spectrum, we encounter individuals with more pronounced psychopathic traits. At the extreme end of the spectrum, we find the individuals who fit the classic Hollywood psychopath mold. The cold, calculating criminals who commit heinous acts without a flicker of remorse. The psychopathic spectrum reminds us that this condition is not a one-size-fits-all phenomenon. By acknowledging this diversity, we can move away from simplistic labels and towards a more nuanced understanding of the psychopathic mind. Primary psychopaths, the masters of charm and manipulation. Imagine a person who can effortlessly charm their way into anyone's good graces. They are charismatic, articulate, and seem to possess an almost supernatural ability to read and manipulate others. These are often the hallmarks of a primary psychopath. Unlike their secondary counterparts, primary psychopaths are less driven by anxiety or impulsivity. They are cool-headed, calculated, and often possess a chilling lack of fear. This emotional detachment allows them to engage in risky or even criminal behavior without experiencing the same levels of anxiety or guilt that would cripple someone with a more typical emotional range. Primary psychopaths are often described as born this way. Their psychopathic traits are thought to stem from a combination of genetic predispositions and neurological differences. They are the chameleons of the psychopathic world, blending seamlessly into society while leaving a trail of devastation in their wake. Secondary psychopaths, driven by rage and impulsivity. While primary psychopaths are often portrayed as cold and calculating, secondary psychopaths are characterized by a more volatile and emotionally reactive nature. Imagine a powder keg of rage and impulsivity, easily ignited by perceived slights or frustrations. This is the hallmark of the secondary psychopath. Unlike their primary counterparts, secondary psychopaths are not immune to anxiety or guilt. They often experience these emotions in amplified ways, but their reactions tend to be impulsive and poorly controlled. They are more likely to act out in anger, engaging in risky or destructive behaviors without considering the consequences. Secondary psychopathy is often linked to childhood trauma, neglect, or abuse. These early experiences can leave lasting scars, shaping the individual's emotional landscape and making them more susceptible to impulsive and destructive behaviors. They are the daredevils, the adrenaline junkies, the ones who live life on the edge, often leaving a trail of chaos and destruction in their wake. Imagine growing up in a world where violence is the norm, where respect is earned through aggression, and where empathy is seen as a weakness. This is the breeding ground for dyssocial psychopathy, a type of psychopathy heavily influenced by environmental factors. Unlike primary and secondary psychopaths, who often exhibit a more inherent predisposition towards their condition, dyssocial psychopaths are largely shaped by their surroundings. They are products of their environment, their psychopathic traits a learned response to a dangerous and unforgiving world. Imagine a child raised in a gang-ridden neighborhood where survival depends on adopting a ruthless and aggressive persona. These individuals learn to suppress their empathy and compassion as a survival mechanism. They adopt the rules of their environment, embracing violence, manipulation, and a disregard for societal norms as tools for navigating their world. Dyssocial psychopaths are a stark reminder that psychopathy is not always a product of nature alone. Understanding these influences is crucial for developing effective interventions and breaking the cycle of violence. The word psychopath often evokes images of criminals and killers lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. While it's true that some psychopaths engage in criminal behavior, it's crucial to remember that not all psychopaths are violent or dangerous. In fact, many individuals with psychopathic traits live relatively normal lives, blending seamlessly into society. Remember that psychopathy exists on a spectrum. Not everyone with psychopathic traits possesses the same level of risk or danger. Some individuals might exhibit mild traits, such as a lack of empathy or a talent for manipulation, without ever engaging in criminal behavior. In fact, these traits can even be advantageous in certain contexts. Imagine a high-powered CEO who thrives in a cutthroat corporate environment. Their lack of empathy might allow them to make tough decisions without being bogged down by emotions. By recognizing this diversity, we can move beyond simplistic stereotypes and develop a more nuanced understanding of how psychopathy manifests in the real world. The question of whether psychopathy can be cured is complex, fraught with ethical considerations and scientific debate. Unlike a broken bone, psychopathy isn't a straightforward illness with a clear-cut cure. It's a deeply ingrained personality disorder. Some experts argue it's largely untreatable due to its ingrained nature. However, there is a glimmer of hope. Certain interventions can help manage harmful aspects, especially in younger individuals. These focus on teaching emotion regulation, empathy, and understanding consequences. The challenge of diagnosis, identifying the chameleons. Diagnosing psychopathy is a notoriously tricky endeavor, often likened to catching a shadow or pinning down a ghost. Psychopaths are masters of deception, skilled at blending in and presenting a carefully constructed facade to the world. This makes it incredibly difficult to identify them, even for trained professionals. Unlike other mental health conditions that might manifest in outward symptoms like anxiety or depression, psychopathy often lurks beneath the surface, concealed by a mask of normalcy. Psychopaths can be charming, charismatic, and seemingly empathetic, making it easy for them to gain the trust of others and avoid detection. Adding to the challenge is the fact that psychopathy is not a single, easily identifiable disorder. It exists on a spectrum, with individuals exhibiting varying degrees of psychopathic traits. The diagnosis of psychopathy is a complex and nuanced process, requiring careful consideration of multiple sources of information and a high index of suspicion. The nature versus nurture debate unraveling the roots of psychopathy. What causes psychopathy has fascinated researchers for decades. Is it hardwired into our DNA from birth, or shaped by the environments we are exposed to? The answer is likely a complex interplay of both. Studies show psychopathy runs in families, suggesting a genetic component. Brain imaging reveals distinct differences in individuals with psychopathic traits. Regions associated with empathy and impulse control appear wired differently. Childhood trauma, neglect, or abuse is a significant risk factor. Children learn by observing and imitating their caregivers. Understanding these factors is crucial for developing effective interventions. Living with psychopathy, the impact on individuals and families. Living with psychopathy, whether as an individual with the condition or as a loved one, can be an incredibly challenging experience. The lack of empathy, disregard for rules, and manipulative tendencies that characterize psychopathy can strain relationships, erode trust, and lead to a cycle of hurt and frustration. For individuals with psychopathy, difficulty forming meaningful relationships. The lack of empathy and emotional depth can make it challenging for individuals with psychopathy to form genuine, lasting bonds with others. They might engage in superficial relationships, using charm and manipulation to get what they want, but struggle to connect on a deeper level. For families and loved ones, emotional roller coaster. Living with someone with psychopathy can be an emotional roller coaster. Support groups, therapy, and educational resources can provide a lifeline, offering a safe space to process emotions, develop coping mechanisms, and navigate the unique challenges of living with psychopathy. Conclusion: separating fact from fiction. Psychopathy is far more nuanced and complex than Hollywood portrayals suggest. It's a spectrum of traits that manifest in diverse ways. While acknowledging the potential for harm, it's important to avoid simplistic stereotypes. Understanding different types of psychopathy helps appreciate the range of behaviors. Early intervention and targeted therapies can manage harmful aspects, especially in younger individuals. Separating fact from fiction fosters a more informed understanding of psychopathy.